My name is Clara. I was born in a small town where everybody knew everybody. Life was simple there. Too simple sometimes. People had small dreams, small houses, small routines. But my heart was full of big dreams. Ever since I was a little girl, I believed life had something special for me. I didn't know what it was. Maybe a big city, maybe a life full of love, maybe a story that people would talk about for years. I just knew I didn't want to spend my life in a place where every day felt the same. I used to sit by my window at night, looking at the stars. I thought those stars were like open doors to another world. Beautiful, shining, waiting for me. My parents loved me, but they were simple people. For them, life was about work, family, and surviving the seasons. For me, life was about feelings, stories, music, and something magical. School was the only place where I felt my dreams had space to breathe. I loved reading novels, especially love stories. The kind where two people meet by chance, fall in love, fight the whole world to be together, and live happily ever after. My friends laughed at me. "Clara, real life is not like those books," they said. But I didn't care. I believed it could be. When I turned 19, things began to change. I started helping my father in his small shop. He sold groceries, milk, and sometimes vegetables from local farmers. The shop was tiny, but it was the center of the town. People came there not just to buy things, but to talk, gossip, share news. And that's where I first saw him. Ethan. He came one evening to buy bread and sugar. I still remember the way he smiled when he asked for the things he needed. There was nothing extraordinary about the moment, but my heart felt something. A quiet thump. Like the first page of a story opening slowly. Ethan didn't live in our town. He was visiting his uncle, who owned some land nearby. He was taller than most men I knew, with kind eyes and a calm voice. I don't know why, but when he looked at me, it felt like he could see the dreams I had inside me. The next day, he came again. This time for tea leaves, then again for rice. My father joked, "Son, do you really need all this, or do you just like visiting our shop?" Ethan just smiled and glanced at me. My cheeks burned red. Days passed and his visits became longer. Sometimes he would talk about his life in the city, how busy it was, how different from our small town. I listened like a child listening to fairy tales. For me, the city was like another planet. One evening, as the sun was setting and the sky was painted with orange and pink, Ethan said softly, "Clara, would you like to see the city someday? I can show you around." I didn't answer right away. My parents were strict about such things, but inside, my heart was already running through city streets, laughing, exploring, living. Weeks turned into months. Ethan and I began to talk more. Sometimes in the shop, sometimes outside when no one was watching. It was innocent, soft, like a flower slowly opening its petals. One winter evening, standing near the frozen lake outside the town, Ethan told me, Clara, when I go back to the city, I want to take you with me as my wife. My breath caught in my throat. Marriage? Life in the city? Love? It felt like all my dreams were suddenly standing in front of me, waiting for me to say yes. But I was scared too. Leaving my family, my home, the life I knew, it wasn't easy. Still, when I looked into Ethan's eyes, I felt safe. Like maybe, just maybe, love could be my home now. I said yes. The next few weeks were a storm of emotions. Telling my parents, the wedding preparations, neighbors gossiping, my friends crying because I was leaving. On my wedding day, I wore a simple white dress. Ethan held my hand as we said our vows. Everyone clapped. My parents wiped tears. And I thought, this was it. The beginning of the story I had always dreamed of. I didn't know then that some stories don't go the way we expect. Some love stories turn into something else entirely. When I left my parents' home with Ethan, my heart was full of hope. I believed love could make everything easy. We traveled to the city by bus. It was my first time leaving the small town, and I kept looking out of the window like a little girl seeing the world for the first time. Tall buildings, busy roads, lights everywhere. It felt like I had stepped into another universe. Ethan smiled at me. "You'll love it here, Clara," he said. "Our life will be beautiful." For the first few weeks, it really was. Our apartment was small but warm. From the window, I could see the city lights at night. Sometimes I stood there for hours thinking, this is my new life, my dream life. Ethan worked in a private company. He left early in the morning, came back in the evening, and always brought me something. A flower, a chocolate, sometimes just a smile. We laughed a lot in those days. We cooked together, watched movies, and made plans about the future. I wanted to study further. He promised he would help me join some classes soon. I wanted to explore the city. He said we would go out every weekend. It felt like we had endless time and endless love. One night, while we were having tea on the balcony, Ethan held my hand and said, "Clara, I want to give you everything you ever dreamed of. A big house, maybe a car, maybe even trips around the world." I smiled and said, "I don't need big things, Ethan. I just need you." And I meant it. But slowly, things began to change. At first, it was small. Ethan started coming home late from work. He looked tired, sometimes irritated. When I asked, "Are you okay?" he just said, "I'm fine, Clara. Don't ask too many questions." I thought maybe he was stressed. New job, responsibilities, it can happen, right? Then, some weekends, he didn't want to go out anymore. He said he was too tired. I didn't complain. I thought he needed rest. But the silences between us grew longer. The smiles came less often. One evening, I told him, "Ethan, I feel lonely when you don't talk to me." He snapped, "Clara, I'm doing all this for us. Stop making everything about you." His words cut through me like a knife. I wasn't accusing him. I just wanted love. the way it was before. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan changed more. He didn't bring flowers anymore. He didn't laugh at my silly jokes. Sometimes he came home smelling of alcohol. When I asked about it, he shouted, "Don't question me, Clara. I'm tired." I started crying at night when he couldn't see me. I told myself, it's just a phase. Things will get better. He still loves me. But deep down, I felt something slipping away. Then came the first real fight. It was raining heavily that evening. I had cooked his favorite dinner. He came home late, wet, and angry. When I asked why he was so late, he threw his bag on the table and yelled, "Why do you always nag me, Clara? Can't you just keep quiet for once?" I froze. He had never spoken to me like that before. That night, we didn't talk at all. I cried myself to sleep. The next day, he brought me flowers and said sorry. He promised it wouldn't happen again. And I believed him. Because love makes you believe, even when you shouldn't. But deep in my heart, a tiny seed of fear had been planted. The days after that first fight felt different. Ethan still said, "I love you," but the warmth in his voice was fading. He became quiet at times, angry at small things. Sometimes he didn't even look at me when he spoke. I told myself, maybe he is stressed. Maybe I need to be more patient. But slowly, patience began to feel like pain. One evening, I had cooked dinner early. I waited for him. He came home late again, smelling of alcohol. I asked softly, "Ethan, did you eat something outside?" He shouted, "Why do you care? Stop acting like my mother." His words hit me harder than any slap could. I didn't reply. I just lowered my eyes and served him food. My hands were shaking so much that the spoon fell from my hand. He looked at me with anger and said, "Can't you even hold a spoon properly?" That night, I cried silently into my pillow. I began to notice other things too. His phone was always locked. He smiled at text messages but never told me who they were from. When I asked, he said, "You're getting paranoid, Clara. Stop imagining things." But my heart knew something was wrong. Weeks turned into months. The house that once felt like a dream now felt like a cage. He laughed less. He shouted more. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. One night, when he came home very late, I asked, "Ethan, where were you?" He slammed the door so hard that I jumped. He came close to me, his eyes full of anger, and said, "I work all day to give you this life. Stop questioning me, Clara." I tried to explain. "I'm not questioning, I'm just worried." Before I could finish, he pushed the table and the glass fell to the floor, shattering into pieces, just like my heart. I froze in fear. He had never been violent before. The next morning, he acted like nothing had happened. He smiled, brought me flowers, and said, "I'm sorry, Clara, I was drunk. I didn't mean it." And like a fool, I believed him again. But the cycle never stopped. Sometimes he didn't come home for 2 days. Sometimes he came home angry and threw things around. Once, when I tried to calm him down, he shouted so loudly that the neighbors knocked on our door. I felt ashamed, not because of what he did, but because I was living this life. One rainy night, I sat on the balcony, hugging myself. The city lights looked blurry through my tears. I whispered to myself, "Clara, where is the girl who had dreams? Where is the love you thought would last forever?" I realized the Clara I used to be was slowly dying inside. I remember the night when everything inside me finally broke. Ethan had come home late again. His words were sharp, full of anger. He accused me of things I never did, shouted about money, about life, about everything. I stood there, silent, holding my breath because I knew if I said a single word, it would turn into a storm. But then, he grabbed my wrist. Not too hard, not enough to leave a mark, but enough for me to feel like I was no longer a human being to him, just someone to blame, to control. I pulled my hand away slowly. My eyes met his, and for the first time I felt nothing. No love, no fear, no hope, just nothing. That night, after he fell asleep, I sat near the window watching the moon. The silver light touched my face, and I realized I couldn't live like this anymore. I thought about the girl I used to be, the Clara who loved books, who dreamed of traveling, who wanted to be a teacher. Where was she now? She was buried under all this pain. I whispered to myself, "Clara, you need to save yourself before there's nothing left of you." The next morning, I packed a small bag. Not too much, just clothes, my journal, and the photo of my parents. When Ethan saw the bag, he laughed bitterly. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. I looked into his eyes and said softly, "Somewhere where I can breathe." He shouted, called me names, told me I was nothing without him. But this time, his words didn't break me. I walked out of that house with shaking hands, but with a heart that felt lighter than it had in years. I went to a women's shelter first. They gave me a small room, warm food, and safety. For the first few nights, I couldn't sleep. I kept expecting him to come, to shout, to break down the door. But he never came. And slowly, the silence began to heal me. At the shelter, I met other women. Some had stories worse than mine. Some had children with them. One woman, Maria, told me, "Leaving is the first step, Clara. Now you can build your life again." Her words stayed with me. I found a job at a small bookstore. The smell of books, the quiet atmosphere. It felt like home. I rented a tiny apartment with the little money I had. It wasn't much, but it was mine. One evening, as I arranged books on the shelf, a little girl came to buy a storybook. Her mother smiled at me and said, "Thank you for helping her choose." And for the first time in years, I smiled back, a real smile. not the fake one I used to wear at home. I realized I was slowly coming back to life. It took months to feel like I was living again, not just surviving. At first, every sound outside my door made me jump. Every time my phone rang, I was afraid it was Ethan. But he never called. He never came looking for me. And slowly, that fear began to fade. One Sunday morning, I sat on the balcony of my tiny apartment with a cup of tea. The sun was soft, the birds were singing, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. I started writing again. At first, just small things. My feelings, my memories, little poems. Then one day I wrote my whole story in a notebook. The pain poured out of me through words. And when I read it back, I didn't cry. I felt strong. At the bookstore, people started noticing my smile. A kind old lady, Mrs. Turner, said to me one day, "Dear, you have eyes that have seen storms, but now they carry sunshine." Her words touched my heart. One afternoon, Mariah, the woman from the shelter, came to visit. She brought flowers and said, "Clara, the shelter is starting a support group for women like us. We need someone to share their story. Will you do it?" I hesitated. Talking about my pain felt heavy. But then I thought, maybe my story can help someone else escape their darkness. So I agreed. The first time I spoke in front of those women, my voice trembled. I told them about the love, the lies, the anger, the fear, and the day I finally walked away. When I finished, there was silence. Then one woman stood up, hugged me tightly, and whispered, "Because of you, I think I can leave too." That day, I realized something powerful. My pain had turned into someone else's hope. Months passed. I saved money, moved into a slightly bigger apartment, and even started evening classes to become a teacher. The dream I had buried for so long. One evening, as I walked home from the bookstore, the sky was painted in orange and pink. I stopped, looked at the horizon, and whispered, "I'm free." The wind carried my words away, like a promise to the universe. Life wasn't perfect. I still had scars, memories that hurt, but now I had myself. I had a future. And I knew the girl who once felt trapped in a dark room was now walking towards the sun.